Welcome to Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. Each week, the NI Bullpen will be covering the world of comics, talking to creators, deep diving into some fantastic stories, and much more. Now let's hand it over to the team and turn a page.
What is going on? Welcome, folks, to Turn a Page, Nerd Initiative's comic book club, the greatest in the internet. My name's Off the Cuff Tom. You know me as Nerd Initiative's pop culture connoisseur. And as always, well, not really, because Ken's not here because he's still a little bit upset from WrestleMania, so we're just going to send one out to him. But because we have such a special guest with us here tonight, we have the statistician to the stars, the better looking half of the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour, ODPH. He's Padawan J.
Hello.
Josh, always a pleasure having you on here. And of course, for a very special occasion, we have a very special guest. That's why you are also very specially here. We have coming back not once, but right now, this is the second time with us, the one, the only, the Gargoyles aficionado extraordinaire, the GREG WEISMAN. Greg, thank you so very much for taking time out and talking with us about the new Gargoyles DEMONA book.
Thanks for having me on board.
Now, I know we had a little technical difficulties because you know what? Sometimes things end up in the Stone Age. Now, if I remember correctly, this is where our new book is going to be coming from out of Dynamite Entertainment. We're going way back and doing a little bit more of the backstory of DEMONA, if I'm correct.
That is true.
So how did this all come to be that this was going to be the next iteration of the books? Because we've had some, with everything going on between the books, like we're set up to go somewhere. Where was the choice to take a quick step back and do this prequel stuff?
So I've been doing various Gargoyles books with Dynamite for a couple of years now, which has been great. And so my old buddy Frank Parr called me up, and Frank and I were both co-showrunners on the original Gargoyles TV series. We produced the show together, and he said, "Hey, I had this idea. What if we did sort of a DEMONA flashback book set, during that 1,000 years when she was alone?" And I said, that's great. It actually fits in with what Dynamite has been looking for as our next thing before we go into the next big, Gargoyles book, main book come back again. They wanted to do a few miniseries, and so we did Quest, and now we're doing DEMONA. And so he and I sat down, and I have this timeline. It's over 400 pages long, and it, starts, well, in prehistory, really, but and goes to 2199. But in this 1,000 years, when Goliath and Brooklyn, etc., are all sleeping as stone, DEMONA is immortal, and she's going around. And I had certain tent poles on the timeline. I don't want to pretend like, I had the whole story written or anything like that, but I have certain tentpole events written there. So we took a look at that. We decided to hit a couple of those tentpoles and then do a couple stories that fall between the tentpoles, and came up with this idea. And we pitched it to Dynamite and Disney. They loved it. And we're off to the races. So I'm writing it. Frank is penciling and inking. Colors are by Robbie Bavard, who colored a bunch of the SLG Gargoyles books back in the day. Jeff is back doing lettering, and Nate is editing. So it feels like a little bit of getting the band back together. And
exactly what I was going to say. Yeah,
it's sort of all-star team, and it's very exciting for me and a lot of fun. And the series is, I think, going to be pretty cool for the fans. Another thing I don't want to pretend, I keep saying this, is that we're going to, in 5 issues, cover the entire 1,000 years, everything that happened to DEMONA.
Why not?
1,000 years in 5 issues.
Well, we'll do 40-page issues. We can do it.
No, that's not happening. So, but we are telling 5 sort of snapshots, 5 individual stories that take place during the first couple hundred years. Each story is set in a different year, set in a different location. And there are actually also different genres. So the first issue is historical fiction. The second issue is sort of a swashbuckling adventure. The third issue is horror. The fourth issue is sort of mystery detective story. And the 5th issue is an elegy. And so they've all got a different feel, a different tone to them, but there is a through line that runs through all 5 issues, mostly centered around Demona's foster daughter, Angelica, who's a new character, not to be confused with her biological daughter, Angela, who we all know from the TV show, but this is a new character, Angelica, who is Demona's foster daughter. And so stuff with Angelica and other things as well run through. There'll be a few surprise guest stars as we go through.
Are we getting
Familiar
Macbeth?
faces. Say again?
Is there going to be some Macbeth?
There is a blink and you'll miss it cameo for Macbeth in issue 1. Beyond that, I'm not big on spoilers, so I'm not going to tell you. But
We'll wait till we stop recording.
but there are some familiar faces here and there who are going to be showing up, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun for both old-time Gargoyles fans, but also it's a good entry point for new Gargoyles fans. You don't need to know the entire backstory. Anything you need to know in any given issue will be explained in that issue, and I think we're going to have fun with it.
Nice. I'm really looking forward to that, especially you got the whole backstory, how much real and how much mythical history are you going to be exploring with this series?
A lot of both. I mean, I've already written the full scripts for the first 2 issues, and there's a lot of real world history in there, and likewise quite a bit of myth and legends that we explore, and we have more of that going forward. Like I said, the first issue is historical fiction, so that is really locked into certain real world events with the gargoyles running through it, or at least our one gargoyle, Demona, running through it. As we've done in the past in episodes like City of Stone, or as we did in Dark Ages, we try and be as accurate to the history as possible with this fantasy element of the gargoyles running through it. And the idea is that historians, 100 years later, they're like, gargoyles? No, that couldn't have happened. I'm going to write those out because no one will believe that. And so they excise the gargoyles from the actual history. But this is the true history, is what we're saying.
Now, with Demona's particular curse that she has, because she doesn't go into the stone sleep, she keeps changing back and forth.
Back then.
She did back then.
Yeah. She does have stone sleep every day. During this 1,000 years, she only switched to turning to human in 1995, I think.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Puck cast that spell on her in an episode called The Mirror in quote unquote Gargoyles Present, which was mid 90s.
Right.
And
I have a Josh.
Right. So, but back then, she wasn't frozen in stone day and night the way Goliath and Hudson and everyone else was, but she still sleeps as stone during the day. It's only at night that she's awake.
Now, with the story going as it is going through, particular, as you said, temples and history and stuff in between, is this going to be, a global trek? Are we going to see different parts of the world, much like we did, like with the Avalon journeys as Goliath went on?
Yes, we're all over the place. The first issue takes place in northern England, specifically in the Northumberland area. The second issue is really a European globetrotter thing. I don't want to reveal much more than that, but we are all over the globe, basically, across these 5 issues.
Right. So with since the comic has gone over to Dynamite, this is the 3rd title you've had under the Gargoyles brand. Does it help or hinder the process keeping things self-contained, or maybe having to bookend the next title?
It's not that different from us doing episodes. So there are certain. Episodes back when we did this as a TV series 30 years ago. So we did 12 issues of Gargoyles, the main book, which told one big arc here called Here in Manhattan. Then we did sort of semi-simultaneously to that, we did the Dark Ages story Alliance, and we did a couple of holiday specials, a Halloween special and a winter special, and then we did Gargoyles Quest. And so each one of these series has a beginning, middle, and end to it. And that's the way I was brought up to tell stories. So it's fine. It's just like, again, if we were writing an episode or say a multi-parter like City of Stone or Hunter's Moon or something like that, you've got the rising and falling action, and it's on the one hand self-contained, but part of the overall tapestry of the whole universe and the whole story that we're telling. And so I don't mind doing these, we'll do 12 of these, 6 of these, 5 of these, whatever, that doesn't bother me. One issue here of a holiday special. I think that's just makes it more fun. But to me, it's all weaving into the tapestry, which includes the original 65 episodes of the first 2 seasons of Gargoyles and the 18 issues we did for SLG in 2008, 2009. All that is canon, and it all sort of weaves this tapestry that is the Gargoyles universe, which a big chunk of my brain kind of believes is real out there. And
we're with you.
When it's really working, it feels less like I'm writing these stories than tapping into that universe and just putting it on the page for people. And often, I was just on the phone with Frank Parr before we got on this call, and brought up something that's going on in issue 3. And it's either it's this huge coincidence because it's just so perfect with stuff we had done in the TV show, this thing we had planned for issue 3. Or again, it's just true because that's what's going on in the Gargoyles universe. That's what happened there. And we're just somehow tapping into it.
Now, you said you got this book of 300, pages of stuff. How many more Gargoyle stories do you have?
400.
400. How many more Gargoyle stories do you have ready, just in the clip, ready to go? Bang, I got it.
Again, it depends what you mean. I don't have them like written, so I can just hand them over as if
floating around in the ether of your brain, like
right. So there are. It's almost literally unlimited because every time I write a new issue, I get 5 more ideas for more stories out of it. I already, again, when you've got a timeline that's 453 pages long, and yeah, everything that's already done is on that timeline. That takes up some of that space, but not all of it, not even close. And so what that suggests to me is that I'm going to die before I tell all these stories. And that's okay. We'll get as many out as they'll let us, and see what happens.
Right now,
I mean, right now, the main Gargoyles timeline has us we left off in Gargoyles Quest in November of 1997, and I'm hoping that once we get back to that main timeline, we might even actually get into 1998. So we're slowly drawing closer to the present.
Again, reminder, on my birthday, the last issue of Gargoyles Quest. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's true.
Completely, not related, but just saying.
I'm sure that was the plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you went from writing these stories for animation and on television to writing them for comics, did the change in medium affect the way you told the story in any way?
Not really. Not at first, certainly. Gargoyles television episodes were incredibly dense. I mean, we just put as much story and as much character and as much content as we could possibly fit into every episode. There's not a lot of fat in a Gargoyles episode, and quite the reverse. There's a lot of content. So when I moved to doing this in comics and really in the SLG days, what I discovered is that to do the equivalent of a Gargoyles episode in comic book form, it took 3 issues. So that in essence, our TV episodes had 3 acts with commercial breaks in between, right?
Right.
So it was very organic to switch to 3 issue arcs. And so the SLG stuff was all very much in 3 issue arcs. There are a couple of exceptions, but mostly that's what we did. And when I started Gargoyles for Dynamite, the first 3 issues of the Gargoyles Dynamite book were also like the first 3 acts of the 3 acts of a single episode. And then I just started thinking to myself, I'm locked in because I've been doing television for so long. And this also sort of dovetailed with the fact that streaming doesn't have commercial breaks, right? So,
Right.
When I was doing the last couple seasons of Young Justice, we were still writing a 3 act form. We needed to do that for production reasons. We
Right.
needed to break the episodes down into 3 acts so that our storyboard artists weren't dying. That we'd give an act to each board artist, etc. But in terms of where those acts began and ended, it didn't matter as much because we didn't have commercial breaks. And so in my head, I was starting to think I've got to break out of some of these old rules that I had been sort of locked into. And the truth is, I started in comic books writing Captain Atom, and I didn't do 3 issue arcs back in the 1980s when I was writing Captain Atom. So I thought, let me get back to making this a comic book and not making it TV scripts in comic book form. And so I started thinking a lot about what I've defined as the unit of measure. So the unit of measure traditionally in television was the act. It's, you've got go from the beginning of the episode to the end of Act 1 because that's where the commercial break is. And the key thing you've got to do is make sure that Act 1 ends on a cliffhanger or with something incredibly intriguing or some big revelation that makes the audience willing to sit through those commercials. Nowadays, kids don't even know what that means, but to sit through those commercials, not fast forward, but sit through those commercials and stay there so that you saw Act 2. And even at the end of Act 3, where the episode ends, to make sure that the show is ended with enough power and enough interest that they're like, I want to come back the next day and see the next episode. And so the unit of measure was the act. But in a comic book, it's different. The unit of measure is the page. You need to make sure that they're interested enough to even want to turn the page. They get to the bottom of the page and go, I got to turn the page to get to the next page. And that idea is that every act in a TV episode has to be its own story with rising action and get you to a point that's interesting enough to keep going. And in a comic book, every page needs to tell a story of some kind, with, again, enough interest by the end of that page to make you flip it over. And when I started breaking it down that way, by page instead of by act, I think the comics got much more interesting, and much less bound by this sort of artificial TV format that isn't part of comic book writing. So I think where things really picked up, I like the first 3 issues of Gargoyles, and issue 1 of Gargoyles is still Dynamite's top-selling issue ever. But I think where the things picked up is with issue 4 of the Dynamite Gargoyles main title, where I wasn't thinking in terms of, okay, this is the first act. This issue is the first act of a 3-act story, where I was just thinking in terms of each page is telling a story. And I think it really ramped up my storytelling, helps the artist out as well. And I think the readers felt it. I don't know if they were conscious of the specifics of what I was doing, but I think they got the feel that with issue 4, things really started to kick into gear. And that's what I've been doing since then. Otherwise, my method is very similar. Television, comic books, I've written novels. It's the same thing. Extremely high tech. I use index cards and Sharpies. I have a big table here in my house downstairs, and I move them around until they're in the right order.
Oh, you have a horizontal murder board.
Yeah. So I used to have an office and I would have a big bulletin board. I mean, an entire wall that I could do that with. But for whatever reason, my wife just didn't like the idea of wallpapering our house with corkboard. I don't know why that bothers her, uh,
It's good sound
but
insulation,
yeah,
it's
but
utilitarian.
she won't go for that. So I use the table, and it's not quite big enough, if I'm being perfectly honest, but I can just barely, most of the time, get a single issue on the table. But we're talking, hundreds of hundreds of index cards.
Now, that's interesting. Talking about the index cards itself, and when it comes to the layout, saying, how you want to work with your artists and make it easy for them, do you actually put the index cards in like the panel order that you would like it so you can try to write to it? Like, do you see that, hey, I only need 2/3 here and 1/3 here for this panel? Do you purposely make it that it's, the 5 panel or the 6 panel or 7 panel? Do you see that ahead before writing the script or vice versa?
So the index cards aren't necessarily per panel. Each index card has one thing on it. So it might be an action, it might be a line of dialogue that's occurred to me early. I mean, I'm not trying to write the dialogue on index cards, but if a line occurs to me, I'm going to write it down. The main reason I'm going to write it down is because my memory sucks, and if it's a good line of dialogue, I want to remember it. So it might be that. It might be, hey, Goliath leaps into action. It might be a lot of things. And I'll move those around until the order of it all feels correct. And I will, as I mentioned, break it down page by page on the index card. Now, some pages might have, I'm not kidding, like 10 or 15 index cards to that page because I've got it in my head broken down that specifically. Other pages might have literally 2 index cards, where it's just this happens and this happens, that kind of thing. I don't generally break it down by panel at the index card stage. Every once in a while, I have a clear visual idea of what I want that page to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will break it down by panel, but that's like the dialogue. It's not like I'm trying to do that. It's like, okay, this idea occurred to me. I don't want to forget it. So I'm going to break it down by panel on the index cards because I've thought of it. So I might as well use it. Right. Then when I take those index cards and I just transcribe them onto a document that becomes the script as I start to fill it out. And then I write full script. So I break it down by panel in the script. I don't tend to tell on most pages the artist exactly how to lay it out. But there are occasional pages where I'm like, hey, I want a full page spread, but a little insert panel in the upper left corner and another little insert panel in the lower right. Or sometimes on a script page, I'll say, hey, this is the biggest panel of the page. I'm not telling him how to lay out the whole thing, but I'm like, this is the key panel. Make this one bigger. This is where we're revealing, Demona's here for the first time. And so we really want to feature Demona on this panel. But, I try not to tie the artist's hands too much. But if I've got an idea of what I want to see, I want to give them as much information as possible. So if they're making a shift away from what I've chosen, they're doing it understanding what I'm looking for as much as possible. My main job as a scripter is clarity. I want, with as much clarity as possible, to explain what I need out of this panel or out of this page. And so if they have a different way to achieve that, great. But again, I'm writing full script, so the dialogue's there. They know what's being said. They can choose to make changes, but they're doing it with the knowledge of what the intent is, as opposed to having to guess at what I'm trying to go for. I'm not big on that, but I am great with them ad-libbing as long as it accomplishes the same thing by the time we're done.
Now, while you've been writing this, what I'm sure is going to be an incredible series. Have you gotten any feedback from Dynamite or Disney when they've been looking at it saying, hey, you know what, maybe this is going, you got to reel this back in a little bit, or no, you know what, dig deeper on this?
Uh, Not really. I get the occasional note here and there, but and Nate and I talk about things. Just hasn't been anything big on these two issues, but there have been issues where Nate sort of said, "Hey, I think you need to start out with more action," and I've gone back in, and Nate's a great editor and has been really helpful. Disney has notes occasionally. They tend more toward the S&P variety, but nothing huge. And I think what's great about the situation is that everyone, I think, acknowledges that nobody knows gargoyles better than I do.
This is true.
And there are probably individuals out there, present company maybe included, who have better memories than I do. But I'm capable of looking up what I don't remember. Um, and uh, and so, there have been moments, not recently, but early on, where it's like, this doesn't seem gargoyles to me. And I can I can cite 7 instances from the TV series when we did this sort of thing. And so I don't get that kind of note anymore, where it's sort of like, is this the show? I'm like, yeah, trust me, this is the show. But if someone has a good idea, I'm not so full of myself that I won't listen. And if we can do it another way, we'll do it another way. But so far on Demona, it's been pretty smooth sailing. And part of it is that Frank and I broke down the 5 stories we wanted to tell. We pitched those stories in advance.
Nice.
There's nothing they're seeing. I mean, there's plenty to surprise our readers.
Right.
But from the standpoint of the Dynamite and Disney executives, they've known what these stories are already. So there's nothing that they're seeing in the script that's like, wait, you're doing this? They already knew that. So
there's no pearl clutches. Gotcha.
right, exactly.
Now, you said that in the main storyline, and that had me thinking, if given the opportunities to write stories in Gargoyles outside the Wyvern and New York clans while they were in cold slumber, who would you want to write first? And of course, not Demona.
It's funny. The way it's worked since we started with Dynamite is they're like, hey, we want to do a mini series while we're doing the first Gargoyle book, because the first Gargoyle book was selling so well. They're like, let's do a mini series on top of it. And I said, great. Here are 5 choices. They picked Dark Ages, and I'm like, great. I love all these characters so much, and I have so many stories I want to tell. I don't care so much, surprisingly, what order it all is. Like, I'd love to do Brooklyn starring in Time Dancer, which is a spin-off idea that I've had since 1995 or 6 or something like that. And we've touched on it here and there in the main Gargoyle series, where Brooklyn spent 40 years jumping around through time because of the Phoenix. Met, got a foo dog as a pet, met Katana, had a kid, Nash. They have an egg also. I mean, and I would like to tell some of those stories, just like I'm enjoying telling these stories from Demona's 1,000 years. I'd love to tell stories from Brooklyn's 40 years. But likewise, we have a spin-off idea about King Arthur called Pendragon that features King Arthur and the British gargoyle Griff and a quest for Merlin. And I would very much like to do that.
And we would very much like to read that.
Yeah.
Right. And if they said to me, okay, we want another spin-off series, what do you want to do next? I'd be hard pressed to decide. I would just say, well, there's this one, there's Gargoyles 2198. I wouldn't mind doing more in the Dark Ages thing. I wouldn't mind doing more bad guys, which we did for SLG. And I find myself, and I'm a little surprised by this, if I'm being honest, kind of not caring which one I do first. So if they say, hey, we really want Time Dancer next, I'd be like, great, let's do Time Dancer. But if they said, no, we really want to do New Olympians, I'd be like, great, let's do New Olympians. And as long as the door is open that I still get to tell stories in this universe, I kind of don't care what order it is. For me, the priority, if there's one, is I want to continue the main storyline, the 1997 storyline, and continue that forward. I wouldn't want to only be doing these side stories, these prequels, these sequels, these spin-offs. If I was only doing that, then I'd really want to get back to the main one. But as long as we've got a plan to go back to the main one, we know what we're going to do when we do that. In terms of these other things, I'm like, that sounds fun. Let's do that. And I don't really care what order. And again, that kind of surprises me. Normally, I'm like, no, it's got to be this because I'm a control freak. But I don't really have that feeling right now.
That's kind of nice. That's the unartist block or the writer's block. He's just whatever.
Let's do it.
Hit the page. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I've got, I don't know, 7, 8 ideas for spinoffs. So it's like whichever one you want to do, I'm game.
All 8 of them, please.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah. Obviously, you can't go into too many spoilers, given the series hasn't come out yet. But can you give a hint as to how big, if any, new things we're going to learn about Demona in the series?
I think that what I'm hoping is that you feel like you get more depth. It's less about big revelations because I don't think there's big revelations to have. We know who Demona is. We've seen her in Dark Ages when she was, in essence, this 16-year-old kid who was still relatively innocent, relatively naive. Still Demona, but so much younger. We've seen her all the way into 1997, where she is a somewhat genocidal
she's a bitch.
Villain. And this is in an in-between stage. We know these poles at either end. This is filling in some of the blanks, but what I'm hoping is that it doesn't just fill in some blanks of the adventure, but it takes you a little deeper because she's so the focus here into who she is and why she is and what she's been through that has driven her to be so dark. And again, these 5 stories take place in the first 200 years of the thousand. So this isn't the be all and end all of that.
Right.
There's more to learn about her. But I do think that if I do my job right, people will come out of this series feeling like they have just a little bit more of an understanding of how she got to where she is. And the interesting thing about Demona, who I find sort of endlessly fascinating, is that she's contains multitudes. I mean, she's capable of being a hero. She's capable of being a villain. She's capable of being murderous. She's capable of being generous. But the one thing she's not capable of is acknowledging her own culpability in when things go wrong. And there are certain things she just cannot face. And hopefully, like I said, if I do my job right, we'll see facets of that across these 5 issues that will add to the picture. Again, when you've got a character who's been alive for 1,100 years, you're not going to, in any one story, be able to get the whole picture in that one story. But every little facet that gets illuminated, at least from my point of view, adds interest to who she is and who she's going to be. And so I look forward to, obviously, readers getting that. We have a little, you mentioned it, Free Comic Book Day, Demona Zero comes out on Free Comic Book Day. It's free. Everyone should go get it because,
Absolutely.
the price is right. Also drawn by Frank and written by me. And we had this whole miniseries planned first. So I was actually, Frank and I were partway through issue 1 when suddenly we had to put the brakes on because it's like, oh, we're doing an issue 0 for Free Comic Book Day and that's coming out first. So you need to get on that right now. And So this story is set in 1997. Goliath and the clan are in it, including Angela, and it just sort of tees up this miniseries. Sort of, it sets up what's to come in this miniseries, I think, in a fairly effective way. It looks fantastic, which I take no credit for, obviously. That's Frank and Robbie. But I think you'll get a little sense there, little tease and a little tee up of what's to come, and things that happen in this Demona Zero will pay off across the 5 issues of the miniseries.
Nice. How often would you like to come back around and fill in the 1,000 years after the series is over?
You know, it's basically the same answers to the previous question, which is that if they said to me, "Hey, this one sold so great, we need more Demona in the past," I'd be like, "Great, we've got 80 more stories."
Right.
And as I said, every time I write an issue, I get 5 more ideas for stories. So, and 1,000 years is a lot of material. The truth is, even between these 5 issues, covers about 200 years, give or take. There are stories that take place between these 5 issues, So it's not like we are being even comprehensive about the first 2 centuries. We're not. We're not trying to. So I'm happy to weave stuff in there. I'm happy to jump to the next 200 years, jump to the last 200 years. These are all stories I want to tell, so I don't have a huge preference right now about what order it all comes in. And I'm just repeating myself. But
Oh, no. With as iconic as Gargoyles has been in the pop culture lexicon, and especially we talked about it before, the amazing voice cast that was on the original series. Do you write with their voices in your head, or
absolutely, and that's actually what makes my job so.
I was going to say,
Frankly,
how much
easy.
of Marina do you keep
It's
hearing
all.
as you've been writing
I
this?
mean, when I'm writing dialogue, I absolutely am hearing Marina in my head. Her performance as Demona is so iconic,
So, yeah.
and so brilliant and so rich. Um, Anytime I write a line of dialogue for her, I'm literally like hearing Marina's voice in my head, and that's true for any of the characters from this show. But obviously, this miniseries focuses on her, and um, Marina is Demona in my mind, and like I said, that makes it easier to write. It just does. I know what Demona sounds like because I know what Demona sounds like. And with Marina's voice in my head, dialogue comes very easy. Even with a new character like Angelica, who didn't appear in the TV show, I mentally cast that actor as well.
I know you. So we did this before. You're not going to tell us.
No, I'm not. I've made that mistake before, where I said, "Oh yeah, I'll tell you," and I did, and then you wind up finding, "Oh, I can." I did this. I made this mistake before on Young Justice. Like, oh, I mentally cast a character that appeared in the comic book, the Young Justice comic book first,
Mm-hmm.
that I did with Chris Jones, and then came into the show, and I said who that was, and who I was thinking of, and then when we actually cast the show, we cast someone different because the person I had in mind wasn't available or whatever. I don't even remember why, but the point was is that I think that did a disservice to the actor we wound up casting.
Right.
Suddenly people were, I think, very unfairly comparing that to their made up version, which was my fault because I did it first. But still, I don't want to. I have hopes that someday we'll do Gargoyles in animation again, and when that comes, Angelica may get cast, and it may not be the person I'm currently imagining. And I don't want to handicap an actor who, in fact, will be creating the role with some imaginary, not that the actor's imaginary, but some,
Preconception.
yeah, preconception that See, there's this thing called the internet. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
Might have heard of
people
it.
on
Where
the
are we?
internet, um, they just latch on to things sometimes
Yeah.
and have trouble, shall we say, being flexible.
Think of
Not
several. I can
everybody,
think of several.
No,
but
Star
the
Wars fans.
the occasional human being on the internet has some trouble with that. And I just don't want to do that to whatever actor we might
Sure.
summon. And it's blue sky stuff. It may never happen, but
Right.
if it does, I don't want to do that to whoever winds up playing Angelica. But yes, even now, as I'm writing Demona and Angelica, obviously I have Marina in my head for Demona, of course, but I've mentally cast an actress to play Angelica as well, and and that helps me out. Not as much as Marina. Marina's locked in as Demona, but I have a good sense of who Angelica sounds like, and that helps me write the character.
I don't know if I told you this last time, and I don't know if I told you this. I actually didn't know Marina was the voice of Demona till about maybe 8 some odd years ago when I was at a convention and we went up to her table and she had all of her characters that she's done. I'm like, oh yeah, Dorney was this, and Frakes was this, and I'm a terrible human being and Star Trek fan because I didn't put two and two together, you idiot. And I was starstruck. This was before I started doing
Right.
all of this. And she's like, "Oh yeah, and I did Demona, and she's just the sweetest as ever." And I'm just gonna,
I mean, I think, and Marina would cop to this. I think. Well, I know because she has. You know, Deanna Troy is the nicest person in the galaxy.
Thank you,
Mm-hmm.
thank you.
Yeah, Deanna is sweet and lovely and wonderful, and Marina can be sweet and lovely and wonderful. But if you ask Marina, are you more like Deanna or more like Demona? Marina will, in a hot second, tell you that she's more like Demona.
That's why, that's why I like her character on NCIS too.
um, and uh, and back then when we were doing the show, she was still playing Deanna.
Right.
It was
Um,
naughty.
and I don't mean like in an occasional movie. I mean week in and week out, she was
Yeah.
playing Deanna on Star Trek: The Next Generation, and then coming over to us. And I think it was very liberating to get to play Demona and pull out a bazooka and start shooting at everybody. I think for her, it
Take so
was a
much
lot of
time.
fun, and she really invested in Demona. I mean, this is true pretty much for all of our actors, but if Frakes loved playing Xanatos. And I've asked him, when he played Riker's clone,
Thomas.
Thomas, I asked him because he shaved when he was playing Thomas, not the very first time, but when he played Thomas again, he shaved off the
Yeah.
beard except for the
Yeah.
goatee. And I said, "You were doing Xanatos, weren't you?" He's like, "Yes, I was."
We're gonna see that episode in a whole new light now. That's awesome.
And I think for Brent Spiner had a great time playing Puck. I think Michael Dorn, for Michael in particular, Gargoyle was a real relief because no 4 hours in a makeup chair to play
Yeah.
Colt. And so that helps. And I think we had a bunch of Star Trek actors. Nichelle Nichols did a lovely, wonderful job as Diane Maza.
Oh yeah.
And I'm focusing on the Star Trek side of the cast because you brought it up. But the truth is all our cast was really just fantastic.
Yeah.
Loved doing the show, and I appeared at various conventions with many of them, and if not all of them at some point or another, and never a better cast assembled, I have to say.
There's a particular bubble around where Gargoyles is at where it sits perfectly in time and space as a time capsule of just a phenomenal corral of actors, whether it's from the Enterprise or another show or whatnot. Like what you folks did with that, just to encapsulate it all and give that show so much texture and heft. That's why I think it still stands the test of time.
Yeah, I mean, we had John Rhys Davies, we had David Warner, we had Roger Rees. I remember we did one episode, and our voice director, Jamie Thomason, was like, we have three of the most famous British Hamlets sitting in that room right now.
Yeah.
You know, you know, different generations.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was just sort of like we were drawing this incredible group of people, and word sort of got out that our scripts were good, and it was a fun show, and it was a fun room. And, you know, a lot of credit to that goes to Jamie Thomason. A lot of credit to that goes to Keith David, who, you know, was our main guy, and always professional, but kept it fun and kept it light so that everyone could have a good time with it. And we had, you know, great people like Bill Fagerbakke and Jeff Bennett and Tom Adcox, and we had the great Ed Asner, who I still miss. Like, I can't even tell you how much. And Frank Welker and Sally Richardson was amazing. I mean, we were blessed. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, I was telling a friend about this today, where they hadn't heard of the show because they're a little younger. They were born after it came out, and
What's wrong with them?
They were born after it came out and after it wrapped up.
Why do you call them friend?
I told them, listen, the entire series is on Disney Plus. Go watch the first go watch the first two seasons. I go, the plot's amazing. The cast is insane, because a lot of times with shows they have great casts, but it's usually like one or two names, like, oh yeah, I know those folks, and you start to learn some of the other folks over time. But I said with Gargoyles, you may not know the name offhand, but you go look up what they've done, and you'll be blown away every single week.
Yeah, I can't.
So I think I ended up hooking them on that. I think they said they're going to go watch it tonight when they got home. So with some of these comics and even some of the stories you have, you know, floating around in your head, have you ever considered pitching or to turn some of these into maybe an audio drama?
I think about it every day, and I have pitched that. There's a problem of economics there.
Right.
In other words, I don't want to ask the actors to work for free,
Right.
and because we have a big cast.
Yep.
Yeah.
My fault, but I'm always putting, stuffing 20 characters in every issue kind of thing. In fact, the first issue of Demona is packed with characters. Second's actually not so bad. And I think Nate was relieved. Nate Cosby was relieved that I didn't overload it. But, the cost of that starts to pile up. And the question becomes, can you outlay that amount of money with any thought that you're going to make it back? And my response is, you'll make it back. The Gargoyles fans will go out and they will get that, and it will do well for you. But convincing everyone else is another thing. And then there's also the issue of license. Like, does an audio comic fall under Dynamite's license, or is it separate license? And obviously Dynamite has a sort of uber Disney license for doing comic books, but what would it work for an audio comic?
Right.
And no one knows the answer to that. And
that's a lot of red tape.
And, obviously from Dynamite's point of view, it should count. And from Disney's point of view, they might be sitting there thinking, well, maybe we could get more money for that. So there's a bit of a disconnect there as well. I don't know how seriously anyone's taken me when I pitched this, but
I
have brought it up more than once.
97 worked. Why don't we have Gargoyles?
Well, and especially too, I know, Marvel's done a couple of audio drama podcasts. DC's in the middle of doing some of theirs. They're extremely popular right now, and especially the production quality that, it's stories and it's characters but then just they take the extra layer of like, oh, we're going down a street in this city. Oh, here's all the people walking by, and here's the cars going by. That it feels like you're there, and they're incredible.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I've done that. I did an audio play called Reign of the Ghosts, based on my novel. It was an unabridged version of my novel, and the only thing I cut from it was because I cast 20 actors doing 30 roles. So the only thing I cut from the novel was he said, she said, you're hearing them. You don't need to hear the narrator go, he said. You're hearing the voices. And I got dynamic music partners who were the composers for Spectacular Spider-Man and Young Justice. I got them to do an original musical score for it. And we had all those actors, and we did music and sound effects. And it's like a 4-hour movie playing in your head. And it's one of the things I'm proudest of, and you can get it still on Amazon. You can download it from Amazon. It's terrific. Ed Asner's on it, Josh Keaton, Vanessa Marshall, Tom Adcox, a bunch of people from Gargoyles, from Spider-Man, from Young Justice do the voices on this thing.
I would love to see his Rolodex. Honest to God.
Yeah.
Can you just for us?
I used to actually have a Rolodex, but long ago, it just became my phone, I guess. But so and Brent Spiner's on it, Marina Sirtis is in this, and it's terrific, and I'm incredibly proud of it. And it demonstrated to me that I could do this. And if I just got permission, we'd get Keith in to play Goliath. He loves playing Goliath. We'd get Marina in to play Demona. We'd get Sally Richardson to play Elisa. Obviously, we couldn't get Ed anymore, but we'd figure that out. And I would love to do that, honestly, because that's the one piece of this that I miss the most is I've got them up in my head, but I actually want my actors to play these lines. I want to hear them say it for real. And I'd love to hear Carl Johnson's music behind it. And, let's throw in the sound effects because
absolutely
we're doing all of it. So let's do it.
Now, coming out of the soundscapes, and just to remind everybody, going back to the paper and the panelscape as it was, Gargoyles Demona is coming out next month. We've got the Free Comic Book Day issue 0, and then issue 1 is coming out later in May. What is it everybody needs to go out, and what is the most important thing they need to understand with this particular series coming out?
Well, like any series these days, it's all about pre-orders. So, go to your comic book store, and ask them to put it on your pull list. If you don't have a pull list, create a pull list. Or you can go to Amazon if you get your books, for Kindle or if that's how you read comics. Pre-order it on Amazon. The name of the game commercially in comics these days is pre-orders. It's not about, I wish this weren't true, but the fact is it's not about day of sales anymore.
Right.
What defines success is pre-orders. So you don't have to worry about that for Demona 0. That's free. Just go to a comic book store, go pick it up. It's free. But for Demona 1, so Demona 0 comes out May 3rd. Demona number 1 comes out May, hold on, I got this right here. Give me just a second. May 28th. But it would help us out if you would pre-order that. By now, you could probably pre-order issues 2 and 3, I guess, as well. And that, Gargoyles has been successful for Dynamite. We're still going. I'm not worried about it. But the bigger it is, the more they're going to ask for.
Right.
So if you want to see Time Dancer, or you want to see Pendragon, or more Demona in the 1,000 Years, the way to prove that out for Dynamite and Disney is through pre-orders.
I think we should start our hashtag campaign, hashtag Dynamite Time Dancer.
Yes.
I think
I'm on board.
I'm all for it. Well, Greg, thank you so very much again for jumping on with us. It is always a pleasure talking about, the Gargoyles and the nostalgia and everything that you've brought to the table for us over the years. So we can't thank you enough for being on with us tonight.
Well, thanks. I'm always happy to come on, and you know how to reach me. So anytime you want me, I'm
absolutely.
I still got plans. We're just busy, but we're going to finish it as we always do. Next time you're at a comic book shop and you see somebody looking around, they don't know really what to get, make sure, grab one of your favorite books like Demona from Gargoyles Demona from Dynamite Entertainment, hand it off to them, and tell them to turn the page. We'll see you. I'm out.
It's such waste of time, swiping left and swiping right on people you could know. 'Cause anyone who's worth a damn be worth way more than a picture could ever show. You could find the right light, find the right angle, and never find your soul. And it can feel like a losing battle, and this plot is full of holes. This modern way of finding love just makes me feel so alone. And I can't be the only one sick of staring at my phone. So look up, talk to me, a better way to spend our energy. Just look up, talk to me. We don't have to float alone on the open sea. Don't know that I believe in the old time fable. Everyone has just one true love. All I know is you're across this table, and you're all I'm thinking of. So look up, talk to me, a better way to spend our energy. Just look up, talk to me. We don't have to float alone on the open sea. Talk to me. Talk to me. It's such waste of time, swiping left and swiping right on people you could know.